So, Wes, I am back from California. KubeCon has come and gone now.
Welcome back. We've got a lot of interesting things to talk about today, but before we get started, I'd just like to let everyone know there's still time to get in on our Black Friday sale over at Linux Academy. We've got hands-on online training in things you're probably interested in, like Linux, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, DevOps, containers, and of course, security. And right now, you can take $150 off a full year of unlimited training. Just visit learn.linuxacademy.com/Jupiter to get a full year of training for just $2.99. That's learn.linuxacademy.com/Jupiter. Now, back to those KubeCon adventures, Al. Did I hear something about you being on a boat?
All right. I mean, I can't get away from doing a conference without an adventure. But there's another thing. I can't get away from doing a conference without running into somebody I know that's doing something cool. And so I brought a friend back with me from KubeCon, and this is my friend Karthik. Karthik, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, you bet, and thanks for having me on here as well. This is a lot of fun. KubeCon, yeah, was indeed an exciting time. I wasn't there for the whole time, but the time I was there was pretty. It was a blast.
One thing that I kept seeing that was different from at this KubeCon than anything else was the security track wasn't kind of just divided into an island to itself. It was kind of integrated in every topic. Did you notice that change?
Yeah, I did. And there's been a big push in the Kubernetes community to kind of bring, or not just Kubernetes, but the cloud native community to bring kind of security, in the focus of developers and in the focus of DevOps. So, in fact, there's like a security SIG with cloud native as well, and I was a part of that SIG for a while. It's really neat to kind of see, all of the different ecosystems kind of like merging together a little bit.
Wes has been doing a podcast for a while called Tech Snap, where he kind of talks about a lot of what's going on in tech in general. But what I like about it is he doesn't focus on just the corporation side. He focuses sometimes on the developer side and the end user side. And what I'm seeing there and with my 100 hours of code folk is that security is becoming more and more prominent through all of these discussions. I mean, Wes, have you noticed that with the subjects that have been coming up?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think we've moved beyond the era where security can be a separate concern. It's almost always one of the first questions being asked.
And one of the things that, Karthik, you brought to my attention is this new conference that you're a part of, which is not just a DevOps conference, but it's a DevSecOps conference. And I was really curious, why the shift? Why put security in the middle of development and operations?
Yeah, El, that's a great question. In fact, like from a DevOps world, we've been seeing a lot of Dev Star Ops lately, whether the star is security or star is network. We kind of see like DevSecOps, DevNetOps, etc. At first, when we started seeing this, there was a lot of pushback. They were like, well, you are by default an included member in the DevOps community, but when I started looking at it from an outside point of view and started talking to security engineers or network engineers, they kind of saw the DevOps world as, being champions of the right way to do things in an organization, and they wanted to be a part of that. So they were like, well, this DevSecOps stuff is kind of pushing security and pushing security into a way of DevOps. So like, the way we think about things from a DevOps kind of perspective, et cetera. And when I started looking at it from that perspective, I was like, you know what, this actually makes a lot of sense. So then I became like a huge champion of it, of wanting to do something like a DevSecOps or wanting to do something like a DevNetOps, et cetera, where it's more about the folks that are outside of the ecosystem kind of coming into the ecosystem and giving them like an inclusive kind of way to be a part of the ecosystem.
So making sure that security or whatever community that are directly involved in the conversation from the get-go?
Yep.
So at the sake of being the naysayer here, I get to the point where sometimes I feel it's just buzzword bingo. That star just becomes whatever product somebody wants to sell or whatever, concept that they want to preach. But how is having these conversations and having DevSecOps be a singular thing changing the way that coding practices are happening, that the development cycle is happening?
Like sometimes we do see, enterprises or whatever kind of say, hey, this thing is like DevSecOps or, this product is DevSecOps. And we actually see that in the DevOps world as well, where we've been, for a while, people have basically rationalized DevOps to be automation. So they're like, hey, you must do CI or you must use this continuous integration product if you're going to do DevOps. But I think it's more about, the mindset and helping folks kind of like think through like, hey, if I'm doing DevSecOps or I'm doing DevNetOps, these are some principles that I should be following, or this is how I should collaborate with other peers.
So for someone maybe already doing DevOps, practicing DevOps, thinking in that style, what changes to start including security in there?
I think it's more, the idea of DevSecOps in general is, I think like Red Hat kind of has this concept, or not concept, but they kind of define it really well, where they say, security should play like an integrated role, not just that after you've released your applications, but through the whole lifecycle of your applications. So it's like trying to push security more to the left. So developers and operations are, paying more attention to security vulnerabilities, like things we're kind of including in our code pipeline, et cetera. And not doing that as an afterthought, where it's like, oh my God, I have to like run through the security audit in order to release my product. I hope I get through this, et cetera. Where it becomes an afterthought. It's trying to pull, think about it upfront from a coding point of view, and bring in a lot of, the great work that security is done in general. Like, a lot of folks on the dev side I've talked to, they kind of know about OWASP, but they might not know about, OWASP top 10, et cetera. And taking those ideas of what we already have and making that a part of like the developer lifecycle.
So for those that might not know, OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because some people might not know about the top 10.
Yeah, I'm not a security expert. I'm more from like a dev side. And I can give you the, when I was like an early engineer, I was like 2 years into my career, or I don't know, 2 years, a year into my career, they were like, hey, you must do this OWASP training. And OWASP was, it's a foundation, and it's the, like you said, the Open Web Application Security Project. And they kind of, they have many lists of different things, but one of the things I look at a lot is the top 10, which is like the top 10 list of the, most common things that people do wrong from a security perspective, et cetera. And it's kind of neat to, know the mistakes you're going to make before you actually make them from a dev perspective, so you can know how to like actually write, secure code and write solid code. And if you adhere to some of those principles, you just end up becoming a better, better developer.
At the sake of self-promotion, I'm going to be speaking at the DevSecOps conference that you've put together, and I'm sure others have put together, not just you yourself. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about is, so some of the top 10 security practices are, injections, things similar to SQL injections or broken authentication. And my talk is all about how you can use capture the flags at conferences in order to get a hand at, let's try a SQL injection for the code for the app that you just wrote, or let's try a cross-site scripting attack on, the website that you just developed. If you don't have access to a lot of these, capture the flags or these security conferences, what recommendations do you have for developers to be able to keep up to date with all of these new security practices and conversations that are happening?
I was actually going to plug your talk a little bit more. One of the things I loved about your talk when you had that in the CFP was from I think from an security standpoint. We ran into each other a couple of months ago at the Texas Cyber Conference, and capture the flags seemed to be like a really big thing from a security space. But like at KubeCon, for example, we didn't actually have like a CTF or anything over there. And typically developer conferences don't have that. But, with this new idea of like everybody kind of comes together, we should kind of talk about, conversations of how things happen in a security way. And, some of those models like capture the flags, et cetera, and bring those to like a dev mindset where we can actually like, think through some of that stuff. And that being said, I totally forgot what your actual question was.
And maybe Wes can jump in on this some too, but it's what resources are there for developers or coders? And maybe that's a question in a minute. What's the difference between the two? When it comes to basically starting out with security practices and implementing these and learning them because it's an ever-changing platform?
I can imagine there must be pushback like there was with DevOps when you tell people, hey, you also need to know this whole other category of knowledge.
Thinking back to experiences that I've had in industry myself, and things I've seen, for me, in my formative years, it was really good to have somebody that I could, somebody senior in the team that I could kind of do code reviews with, who'd kind of seen security issues and stuff like before. So it helps take away from making easy kind of mistakes, etc. Um, Crypto is one of those things where I'd always like when we end up having to create a lot of salts and a lot of secrets and stuff like that. And I'd always like ask somebody like, hey, how do you like, is this like a cryptographically secure library, et cetera? So having somebody that you can talk to, whether it's senior developers on your team or teams, or security folks on your teams that can kind of talk about security from a language perspective is great. Today, we also have, we have vulnerability scanners with your code, so they can kind of go through, scan dependencies and things like that to make sure that you're using better versions, linters, automated code scanners, etc.
Bringing in more automation so you can get results faster and integrate it into the development workflow.
Right, or at least like something that when you're writing the code, that it tells you, hey, there's you might want to check this because this is not really like cryptographically secure way, or you might have a bug here, etc. Security, a lot of times, I think James Wickett says it when he, in a lot of his talks, he talks about how security issues are actually just bugs, but they're high profile, like CVEs or something, end up being like more major issues, but they're like something that you wrote that isn't supposed to be there, or you've written it wrong, etc. So they're bugs that we introduce.
So when you brought up James Wickett, one of the things that I remember is an article by him. I believe it's called "Security's Shift Right." And it was kind of where I started trying to figure out what DevSecOps really meant. Does it mean that I, as a developer, now have to keep all of these security practices in mind, and I've got to worry about all of this, just kind of adding a lot more stress to my workload? Or does it mean that I'm working closely with my company's security team and I'm, basically kind of pen testing code as I'm going? I guess it could mean any of that, but what are you seeing the actual security practice be out in the wild? Like, how is this actually being implemented?
That's one of the reasons we wanted to have a conversation around the conference itself. Like, how are people actually implementing some of these things out in the wild? We have a talk on how some of the folks in there's talk on security with agility in the serverless world, and that's some of the folks from Neiman Marcus talking about how they introduce security in a inside of like a DevOps kind of world. Things that I've seen in the wild specifically on this is some folks do end up having a lot more developer training upfront, where it's like trying to train developers to not necessarily like be security experts, but at least know like, hey, here are issues that you can run into if you work in a specific manner, et cetera, whatever it is. Other teams embed security folks inside of the development feature teams. So not necessarily to do like a day-to-day coding kind of practice, but for folks to actually be there when developers actually need the help when we are writing the features.
Right, an embedded resource that's not a ticket away, but is just a desk away.
Right. And that was a common practice we did in DevOps as well, where we were embedding operations folks inside of the dev team. So when you start thinking about, well, how do I deploy this? You can ask someone immediately because they're on the team. And I kind of envision the same thing happening with security too, where it's like you can just ask the person versus making assumptions.
It seems like with DevOps there was a mindset shift, acknowledging that operational issues were also a concern of these development feature teams, or at least it should be. And that does seem like a natural parallel to security because, as you said earlier, all these problems, they're just bugs. They're code changes that need to happen.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like, all of these things from a high level, from an engineering point of view, we have the things that we, are really good at, or, the problem areas that we kind of focus on. But in general, like we're all shipping products, right? So we're all part of the same team, like releasing things. So if the product fails because it's a security issue, or if it's feature coded wrong or something, it's the end result is still the same. It's you're not shipping a great product. So having the entire team kind of work on the different aspects of things actually gives you a better shot at shipping something that customers actually like.
We've kind of hinted around it for a little bit, but if folks want to learn more, how do they get involved or learn about the DevSecOps conference?
The DevSecOps conference is like a global thing. It's been in a bunch of cities before, and we're actually excited to bring it to Austin. It's on December 16th, and mostly it's a conference organized by I talked about James Wickett a little while ago, Ernest Muller, who also runs like DevOps Days Austin, and myself, and we're all kind of in like different spaces. I think James is more he's pretty much in like security. um he's in the security space more than Ernest or I am, but we're all like big proponents of actually wanting to do the right thing, and for folks to at least start a conversation, which we've kind of done successfully from a DevOps standpoint. So we're doing that with security as well. We're excited to have a lot of great speakers. Shannon Leitz, who's actually DevSecOps on Twitter. She's going to be one of the keynoters, as well as Kat Sweet from Capsule 8. They both have really interesting ideas of practical stuff about how to actually get DevSecOps done in your organization, as well as things that you should be thinking about from like a higher level as well. So we're excited to have that. And then Elle, we're super stoked to have you too. And yeah, it's gonna be a good time. We have a lot of talks. We have a set of lightning talks as well. And so yeah, it should be a good time. December 16th.
If anybody wants to reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Great question. I'm on Twitter. I'm Iteration1 on Twitter. Or if it's specific to the conference, you can just find it on DevSecOpsDays.com. I think the Austin one is the one that's next. So the URL will be in there.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have links to everything we've talked about today over at extras.show/37. And remember, there's still time to get a full year of hands-on online training for just $2.99 at learn.linuxacademy.com/Jupiter.